Hey, it's Midnight Raven, and I thought today we would just take a look around my local graveyard. Sounds silly. Go look around a graveyard. What do you expect to find? Graves? I know, a bit cliche. But we're starting off here in one of the corners. I'm shaded by this tree because it is extremely hot in the UK right now. The sun keeps going in and out, but when it is out, boy is it hot. I thought I would just take a look around at some of the graves. Some of them, as you can see, are broken, some lay down, some stand up, some are arched. You also get the military ones as well, which are a bit different. In the churchyard, you also get these kind of ones, where they're military ones with the cross on the top, which are also kind of cool. And then you also get the ones from the Navy as well, for the fleet. These are pretty old ones, dating back to 1900s, so they're a little bit different. And then you get ones that are crosses, so you get all different kinds of varieties. You even get tombstones here where they're encased in actual mausoleum tombs, which are also kind of cool. Most of the graves here though are pretty much the standard shape, which is what most graves are. They're arched. No idea why. My illusion was they were always arched because that's what a church window was. If you look at church windows, they are arched, and the graves were to mimic the windows in a church where they're arched. I don't know what that's like in America, whether their churches are kind of the same as ours. I think in America, more than churches, you have what we call chapels. So they're little tiny places, generally like a barn-esque, with a little wooden cross on the top. They're not as elaborate as UK churches, and they're more like chapels in America. I could be wrong, let me know. I'm not not in America to know. This one was quite weird, you know. Originally it would have had a cross on the top, possibly. You do get kids ones here as well. I'm not going to show you any of the kid graves because that would be just immoral, but you do get kids, and there's their little tiny graves. But we're not going to look at names or anything. We're not doxing children, but you do get, unfortunately, families where a mother obviously had two children, maybe died in childbirth, maybe it was a car accident, but you do get kids graves here, which is unfortunate that kids can die at such a young age. But you can, in the UK, be buried in the same plot as your parents, your grandparents. You can literally be buried as a conglomerate of generations throughout the years, and all be buried in the same area, in the same part of a churchyard. Back in the day, you used to be able to buy what was known as family plots, where you could buy a piece of the cemetery, which would be fenced off, and then your graves would all be in one section, and you'd basically be buying what you would call a family plot graveyard, where you'd be buried, your grandparents would be buried, your children would be buried, their children's children, and you'd all be in a little fenced off area. A lot of people don't do that. They'll be buried now one on top of the other, or they'll try and be buried at least in the same cemetery, not necessarily in the same part of the cemetery, because the UK never really looked into other forms of burial until modern day. Forms of burial were always, I hope you can hear me because of the wind, being buried. Now there are many ways that you can now be buried. You can have a humanitarian funeral, you can have an open air funeral, you can be cremated. There are other ways without obviously blocking up graveyards, because when you bury somebody in a grave, an average grave is about 6 foot long, depending on the plot that you get. So you get a 6 foot grave, and you think how big that is, and then you times that by how many people there are in the world. And you'll eventually get to the point when you can't bury everybody. And that graveyards back in the day, before they made more churches and more graves, were getting full. So the other option, apart from burying, became cremation. And cremate your ashes, and then you would just have a tiny plaque, which took up a few inches, depending on how big your plaque was. Or you could have your plaque in what they call like crematorium buildings, where you just have a tiny little plaque on the wall with your name and a bit of your ashes behind it. But then you get really elaborate ones like this one. You know, proper elaborate kind of tombstone graves that are laid down. But the problem is, over the years, the traditional graveyards and gravestones lean and they break. And as you can see, the ground changes over the years underneath the graves, and they start to lean and they start to sink. Or, in this case ones, you start to get cracks in it where they've weathered, because some of these graves have sat here for 100 years. They're going to weather, you know, acid rain, sun, snow. And these are quite cool. I love the shape of these ones. I think they're, you know, very patriotic, if you want to call it, for the shape. But moving on, what I do is I walk in the middle, because you're nigh on not stepping on anybody, within reason. Then you get these kind of ones. Now these are proper elaborate ones. And this one is like a vault. There's someone buried. Listen. Do you hear that? This under here is hollow, and then there's just a body inside. It's just a hollow underneath. It's really heavy on top, but underneath it's hollow, so it's just got a body in. Then you get these ones, which are basically slab burials. You get a grave, and then you get a slab on top, and that's literally it. Moving on, going around the graveyard, you obviously get different types of ones. Some are crosses, some don't have crosses, and because of the, you also get ducks. Because of the weather, the graves used to erode, and they still do, which makes it a little harder to let's walk in the middle, to keep the uptake on them, because most people that were buried here are buried up to 100 years ago. Some of these are from 1800s, and there's going to be no one left in their family to tend to the grave, to come to the grave, to mourn. So they just get left in disrepair. These ones were quite cool here. These whole like window shaped ones remind me of like a house, which I thought was kind of cool. Or you get these kind of ones, which you don't get very many of, I must say. But they were a big thing during the day. Oh my god. Did you see the rabbit that literally walked in front of my feet? Did you see that? I have no idea if I caught that on camera, but god did I flinch. Let me just change my bag position, because that was kind of weird. So moving on, as you go round, you do get the different types of graves, and it's a very peaceful graveyard. It is in the centre of town, so it's not like massively quiet, if you know what I mean. But it is peaceful. So then you get this kind of one, which is huge. But what you will find is that underneath here is like an entire family of people. So you'll have in loving memory of Henry, Francis, and there's an entire barrage of people just all in the same grave, buried on top of each other but going down. It's a very weird concept. The tombs, as I call them, take up so much space though. So it's hard to think that being buried in a graveyard would be a good thing, because it takes up a lot of space. These tombs are not very small. And like I said, an average grave you have 6 foot between you. So what happens is when you have a grave like this and you have it 6 foot that way, you'll also have it 6 foot that way, because he'll come out to there, and then there's a space to walk through the middle, and then you have this one, and then 6 foot again. So if you take up 6 foot of room, then you have to have a space to walk between the graves, then another 6 foot of room. The graveyards then become over full because you have to have so much in between. So this one's also quite cool. Look at this. This one's actually got the little gated thing that I was telling you about. So as you can see, you get these little bits going around the edge, and then they have these really cute fleur-de-lis on the side. And then, like I said, what you get is you get multiple families all buried in the same place. So you'd have a mum, a dad, children, grandparents, and they'd be in these little gated things. Sometimes it's a husband and wife, sometimes it could be an entire family, and they'd all be buried in the same place. And then this would be put round as a kind of barrier for the grave, which you can see here. So moving on a little bit more, and then we'll call it a day. So here again we have what I call the soldiers' tombs, the lying down ones. Then you have another big one here, another massive size tomb again. Like I said, you'd get an entire family in this over many years, decades, or even centuries, depending on how big a family you had. So these were to stop graveyard poachers. So with a normal graveyard like this, they could just dig up the ground and steal your body. I know, it sounds crazy, but these were built so that graveyard robbers couldn't steal bones and sell for science. Because of here, you would dig the ground up. These were done like this to protect the bodies from grave robbers, because if these kind of things were built, there's no way you're getting in that to steal bodies. And people used to sell body parts, like skulls and full skeletons, to science for medical reasons, for autopsies, you name it. They sold it to medical stuff, and that was back in the day. And hence these kind of things being built, which deterred grave robbers. I know it's an interesting concept, grave robbers, but it was a money making thing back then. They would sell, good afternoon Mr. Duck, they would sell your skeletons for science and make money off of you. This graveyard is also home to a very massive duck colony as well. So if you're a fan of graves and ducks, I mean, this would be perfect for you. I mean, look at all the ducks. It's a very peaceful graveyard. If you come here in the evening, it is very peaceful. And one of these days I want to film it at night. But you do get the ducks hanging out. Alright, boys. But it's a nice graveyard. Hey boys, you do get the ducks over there, and there's tons of them, literally tons of them. Alright, Mr. Quack. But if you want to like and subscribe and give us a big thumbs up and tell me what you thought of my little trek around my graveyard. This is only a small part of the graveyard. There's actually another entire side. But the church is open today, and I don't want to disturb too many people because it's a church open day, and I want to respect people being in the churchyard. So this is just a tiny portion of the church. We also do have a cemetery as well, which is a bit of a walk for me. But if you want to see that video, we can go down there one day and film it. It is slightly different to this graveyard because with it being a cemetery, it doesn't have a church. In the UK, cemeteries, graveyards are all different. Graveyard is attached to a church. A cemetery isn't. It's standalone and it doesn't have a church. The only thing it will usually have is what I call a caretaker's hut. So if you want to like and subscribe and give us a big thumbs up, comment down below. Are you a fan of graveyards? Do you like walking in graveyards? Are you like me? Do you like to hang out in graveyards? Like me, I am fascinated by macabre stuff, by death, by the history of graveyards, tombstones and that kind of thing. Let me know. Like and subscribe. Give us a big thumbs up. And I will see you all very soon. Take care and thanks for watching. Bye guys.